Morning, how's everybody doing? Do we have some people in the house? Christopher England, hello. Brandon, hello. Joe, long time no see, hope you're well. Paul, hi. Pipe John. And Daniel. How you doing, Daniel? Hope you're bearing up. Coming to terms with things slowly. Takes time. Hi Tim, hi Josh. Well, tonight I'm coming to you from the workshop. I'm not sure if I'm going to smoke because I am somewhat under the weather. And sore throat, smoky throat, coughing. Piper, how you doing? Well, we've got some serious stormy weather here, guys, so we'll see how we go out here in the garage. We've got an amber warning for the whole of the country tomorrow. I don't recall ever in my lifetime ever having an amber warning which affected the whole country at the same time. So we're kind of battening down the hatches. So we'll see how we go. Glad to hear that, John. I suppose it takes time after surgery. Excuse me. Morning, North Country, how you doing? I'm trying to fend off a full-blown flu, but it's getting there, I'm afraid. I've been holding it off for a couple of weeks now. And it's really getting pretty close. Yeah, that will take time, Daniel, I'm afraid. I just hope that my roof stays on. In fact, I might just put a couple of more screws in it. We'll see. Yeah, I need to rest, absolutely. Mike, you're quite right. Good evening, good morning. Hope you're all well. Well, a few things to discuss tonight. I'm here in the workshop, really, for Andrew Sirigliano, Bluefin Piper, because he's been asking me a lot of questions about. He's kind of dabbling a little bit with his pipe. He's just playing around with pipe making. So I said to him, I'll come in and do it live from the workshop tonight, and then you can ask him any questions. So hopefully he'll join us soon. But in the meantime, I'll tell you what I've been up to. I've been working on a bowl coating. I did say to you guys that I've ordered some charcoal, which I have, and that arrived today. And I've done a bowl coating on a few pipes, mainly the two mortar pipes. The one that Stephen sent back to me, I've put a hefty dose of it in there. Good for you, Mike. I've never actually tried it. I don't think, unless you've sent me some in the past. I don't think I've tried it. I think somebody sent me some Drew Estates to try. I've been wanting to try that meat pie only because it sounds delicious. Because who doesn't like a bit of meat pie, right? But all of that stuff's finished now, isn't it? You did send me. At the back of my mind, I did remember something. But I don't think you sent me the meat pie, did you? I think it was the Gatsby. Is that a Virginia flake? The Gatsby. Anyhow, so hi Joe, Virginia. Yeah, I thought so. I vaguely remembered about the Gatsby, but I don't think I've tried the other ones. Anyway, so this is the mortar that I made, and hi Matthew, thank you for joining. This one I've put quite a thin coating on it. Let me see if I can get a light. Oh, why isn't that working? So I've put a thin coating of, well, if you imagine it would be looking a bit like this. Okay, not as smooth, but so you can just see a uniform grey sort of black colour in there. Hi Tim, if you remember this pipe, guys, this is going back a while. If you remember, I bought this from Eldritch Pipes. He makes his own stem rod material. And if you recall, I made this pipe. This pipe, it's got some gorgeous, gorgeous grain on it. But it was in the early days, and this was very, very thin, if you remember. And there's a bit of a deep gouge, a sand crack or fissure, whatever you want to call it, right there in the front. And also messed up this joint here, but still it's an attractive looking pipe from a distance anyway. But anyway, so because it's so thin, I've never smoked it, and it's got that crack, so in this spot here it's going to be really thin. So I thought maybe I'll give it a coating, a bowl coat, and maybe gently break it in. So there you can see the bowl coating, which looks pretty okay. I'll probably take a little swipe on it with once it's fully dry, with a tissue, and just smooth it out. But that's worked out pretty well. My only sort of consideration is I've got the pipe, the 673 pipe, the Matches Tribute pipe, and I'm considering whether to bowl coat it or not. What do you guys think about that? Ciao Sandro, how are you doing? I'm not doing so well. I've got a bit of a cold. But otherwise all right. So what do we think about bowl coating this one, guys? Any opinions? Yeah, North Country Fisher, sorry, mortar is bog oak, which is wood, which has kind of been sitting in bog, in swampland kind of thing, underwater, boggy kind of mud for many thousands of years, and it just has an effect on the wood, and it turns it out, and it looks like that basically once it's finished and sanded. A lot of sanding gets it to that kind of finish, to that kind of look. It really does have some interesting grain patterns. This one is just spectacular on the grain. Look how it sort of meets in the middle there. It kind of crisscrosses the grain from that side, the grain from that side, and meet there in the middle. It's a stonking pipe, this one really is. This one is already gone. This one is going to this one's going to Stephen Cobbett of the Shire. It's a replacement for, I mean, technically speaking, it's not my fault. It's just one of those things, but he bought a pipe from me. He can't smoke it. He's not happy with it, so I'm replacing it. It's quite simple, really. I'm not. It's not a negotiating situation. It's just, you know, I can't have a customer with a pipe that he's not happy with. So in the meantime, I've received it back, and I've given it a healthy dose of that bowl coating, and we'll see what happens if it becomes smokable again. I'm going to let that dry off, and then maybe do another coat on top of that, and then let that dry off and smooth it out, and that hopefully will be good to go. Yeah, the grey one is gone. I mean, I will do more. I've got more mortar. I've got quite a bit of mortar here. A couple of nice big blocks there. So there's enough there to do half a dozen pipes at least, maybe even more. You can probably get 2 out of each of these blocks. 2, 4, 6, 8. Yeah, so I can probably do about 7 or 8 pipes on the stock that I've got at the moment. Sorry. What I'm trying to do at the moment is slowly build up. Oh, he's here. Andrew's in the house. We were talking to you about. I was talking about the reason why I'm in the shop tonight. A bowl of hot water, a bit of Vicks, Victory Vicks on the chest, and an early night is what I need, really. So perhaps we'll curtail tonight's live a little bit. So that's the bowl coating. Actually, I got a delivery in from Axminster today for some supplies which Andrew might be interested in. Before I get into what Andrew actually wants to know. So I bought a bunch of tape, which is really good stuff. So when I'm protecting some shanks or pipe rims when I'm sanding, I use that. Some good quality gloves. This is the glue that I use, the adhesive, which is a 2-part epoxy, which goes off very quickly. This is a 5-minute one. Very, very good stuff. I bought myself a small Stanley spirit level to help me with lining up the pipes when I'm drilling. A new blade for my bandsaw, which hasn't been working very well. A selection of sandpaper. Sandpaper is one of the topics which Andrew asked me about, so we'll get into that soon. So I wanted to show you the pipe that I'm working on at the moment. So you guys may have seen a picture of a block that I've got on my lathe to make a pickaxe pipe. And the block is really quite a spectacular block, and I wanted to make the most of it. So this is where I'm up to so far. The grain on it is just unbelievable. So what I'm trying to do is to keep a little vein of plateau, which I've just rubbed this down to get rid of the brown stuff, and that actually has come out really good. It's nice small little heads on the plateau. And I'll just give you an idea of what this grain is like. So that's probably going to be a church warden. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to make a short stem or not. I might even make a stem. I might even cut a stem myself, because I'm probably going to keep this pipe for myself. Hey Robert, how you doing? So I just want to show you some of the grain on this pipe. That's one side. And that's the other side. So you've got sort of bird's eye coming through there, which are the ends of these straight grains, because it's coming out. And it's kind of just touching on it there. I could go a bit deeper there and get more of the grain, but I think it'll end up making this bit here a little bit too thin. So this one, if I manage to keep things the way they're going, that's going to be a memorable pipe. I mean, this really, if this was in the hands of one of the Danish greats, this pipe would be a Ramses or one of those kind of pipes, just something else. But it's in my hand. I mean, this, with a grain like that, you could probably sell for a lot of money. There are a few flecks here and there. It could be that they'll go if I sand more, but I'm not even going to bother, take the risk. Yeah, you can use electric sander, but when you're finishing and you want to really just get that finish ready for polishing and for staining, you do that by hand, because you've got a better control. All of this has been done by machine, by sander, and I'll show you around that in a minute, because Andrew wants to know all about that. Signum and Tony from Rhode Island. So yeah, this is going to be something else. It looks a bit like a, what's his name, claw, a crab claw, doesn't it? Ideally, I'd want this to be a little bit narrower, But because I wanted to have this effect here and to keep that little bit of plateau, I had no choice but to keep the diameter. And in order to get a 9mm in there, I had to have a certain depth here as well, which is really very, very close. It's really not ideal for 9mm, to be honest. So there we go. So that's that pipe which I'm in the middle of now. It feels great in the hand as well. So I'm looking forward to finishing this one. There's no stain at all on the mortar. That's the beauty of the mortar pipes, is that this grain, a bug. So there's no staining. All I've got on here is polish, is carnauba wax, nothing else. And a lot of sanding. The bottom line here is sanding. It's quite a bugger to work with, I'll be honest with you. Mortar is not simple. You could get a bad cut and the whole thing lifts off. Because of the way the grain is, there's lots of ends of grain. And if you catch the end of a bit of grain with your turning tool, you could actually just lift a whole piece of grain, and you've got to sand it all the way through again. That's if you haven't wrecked your pipe, which you can. We'll definitely be making more mortar. As I said, I've got enough blocks here to be doing another 7 or 8 pipes. So I'll definitely be doing some more mortar. All being well. The mortar is not British, no. This particular mortar comes from probably one of the Balkan countries. I'm not actually sure where it comes from. Yeah, it's beginning, Tim. It's beginning. We're starting to get a little bit of the wind starting to hit. It's not crazy windy, but it's getting there slowly. I'm kind of resisting the urge to have a pipe. I haven't had a pipe yet today, so I think if I don't have a pipe today, maybe tomorrow, hopefully, I'll be able to fend things off a little bit and have one Monday, all being well. I'm actually a guest at a wedding on Monday, not working, so that'll be a nice break to be waited on for a change. Your log burner's going right. I'm sure it is. It's over oxygenated by the sound of it. Excuse me. Does the tobacco taste any different in a mortar than a briar? Well, for me it does, but I've probably never given a mortar pipe enough of a chance. I've probably never broken it in sufficiently to give a real opinion. But some people love mortar pipes. I haven't made an olive wood pipe yet either. I haven't made pear either, Daniel. Olive is something, it's got some lovely grain. I personally am not that attracted to it, but I can see why people would be. It's got a really interesting grain. I find that the grain structure there is too broad. The gap between the grains are too big for my taste. Or cherry wood. I've really only worked with mortar and with briar so far. I'm not in any rush to really work with anything else. I'm still perfect. That is true. In terms of absorbency and flavour neutralness, it is quite similar to a meerschaum. I don't know if it's the same. I think mortars do have a bit of a taste, but people who do smoke mortar a lot do say that it's a similar experience. I don't know about mahogany. You got to be really careful with which woods that you use. You got to make sure, because some of them can leach out some seriously bad and dangerous stuff. Actually, Bayou Guru, Jason Mouton recently did a video talking about that. Yeah, cheers, Sandra. Right, so Andrew, do you want to tell me specifically the things? Yeah, poisoning, absolutely, Paul. Some, especially the exotic wood, that could be very, very dodgy indeed. So I stick to briar, I stick to what's known, and that's about it, really. I do have some pen blanks of other different woods, but most of those are generally well used and quite well known. But things like babinga and these kind of things, zebrano, some people say you've got to be careful with those types of wood. I do wear a mask. Well, since I got the extractor, I use it less because it does take away the dust. But even when I'm... See, this is what I bought recently before I bought the extractor. And I don't use this as much now, but whilst I'm unwell, I'm definitely using it. I used it this evening. And this is an electronic one. And this is fantastic because you got full vision. And because you're pushing air into the mask, it takes away all the mist, so it demists immediately as soon as you turn it on. I do need to clean out these filters. They're really clogged up. I didn't even notice how clogged up they were. So I don't wear this one as much now because of the extraction that I've got, which is really good. But I still wear something like this when I'm sanding, and these are really good as well. This is what I used before I had this. Before I had this thing. But yeah, tonight I definitely wore this. Let's see what happens. I've never actually opened these. Hi Newton. Look at that. These are pre-filters. The actual filter is in there, and that looks pretty good. That's probably because of the pre-filter. I've got a pack of these pre-filters. Yeah, you're right, Chad. I was actually going to bring some watches down. I was going to follow your lead, Chad. I don't know if you did do it last night, but watching Newton's video, I also thought, you know what, it's quite a nice idea. Maybe we'll start something new, bring out our watches. But I forgot to bring them out. It would be. Lemsip here, definitely going to have something. A bit under the weather at the moment. It's been building up and I've been pushing it off by sort of just fending it off, getting enough sleep, just about enough sleep to stop it getting full blown, but at the moment it looks like it's heading that way. So we shall see how we go. Not smoking, I haven't smoked today at all. Anyway, I was just showing you guys this pickaxe that I'm working on, and so those of you who haven't seen it, it's got amazing grain on it. I almost feel guilty making this pipe because it really should be in the hands of somebody special. Right, so Andrew, you asked some questions. Where are we? Okay. Okay, so when I first started, yeah, absolutely see smokes. That is a problem with this pipe. I've miscalculated that a bit, but as I said, I'm going to be keeping that pipe for myself because of that. It's really close. So that's not going to be for sale. I will contrast stain that, probably, yes, because especially if there's a few little spots on it, I'll want to hide those with a bit of contrast staining. So, talking about the tools, when I first started, I have a philosophy with everything that I do when I buy stuff. So when I first started in photography, I used the same philosophy, and that is, I'll buy the best that I can afford. And that's what I did here. It's why I didn't jump into buying a lathe, and I kind of went into that in a more considered way. Daniel, never in a million years. What would be the point of rusticating a pipe with phenomenal grain like that? I mean, the only spot that I would consider rusticating is this section here, maybe. But even that, okay, this area here is quite bland. There's nothing much going on here, but here you've got the sort of parts of that grain which will come through on a contrast stain. That'll look quite flamey over there. So yeah, I suppose I could, but I think that if I did that, it would spoil the general look of the pipe. It would become a part rusticated, part smooth pipe. It doesn't warrant it. I think this pipe needs to be kept smooth, and it would be... You just view a pipe slightly differently in terms of its class, in terms of its sort of grade, if it's completely smooth or not. Yeah, and it's got that. Yeah, I kept that there just... I was really wanting to keep this and to have this like sort of straight area here to highlight that straight grain, and that's worked out really well. I've still got to fine tune it. This is just the rough shaping. It's down to 400 grit on the sanding wheel, and the rest I'll probably be doing by hand. I'll probably take that up to about 1200 grit, something like that. Alright, Andrew, so in terms of the tools, so when I first started, so as I was saying, I get the best that I can afford. So when I started in photography, for instance, I bought the Canon. That's sorted. You don't have to worry about it if you get the best that you can afford. It's not the ultimate, but it's the best that I could afford. Hey Kevin, how you doing? So I bought, these are Robert Sorby tools. I bought a set of, I think, 6 tools, which is a general universal set for covering most needs when it comes to turning. I use this tool. So if I can give you any advice, initially, this is the only tool I use when I make a pipe. Unless if I'm doing a little sort of line, then you could use this, but I use the parting tool for that, which is this tool here, which has got a very, very sharp point there. So I'll use that to create the grooves. But this is really the only tool that I use to make pipes. The rest is done by drill bits. But in terms of turning, yeah, Kevin, absolutely. In terms of turning, this is the only tool I use. It's a paring tool, and it's got about a 4 or 5 mil head, and that you've got to keep sharp all the time, which I do on a bench grinder. And that's something also that you have to get used to make sure that you don't muck up the head. So I've got a little sort of rest on my angle grinder. You can buy professional jigs, but you can buy expensive kind of jigs. You can buy them cheaper as well to sharpen your tools. But as I say, at the moment I don't really have use for them. I've got a little sort of dream in the back of my mind that I might start doing other bits of wood, different things, maybe ashtrays, maybe bowls, things like that. Excuse me. But for now, as I say, this is really the only thing that I use. And if you don't want to go the whole hog, Andrew, and you want to keep things down low, which is the best thing I can advise you, just get one tool. You can buy them individually. I think it's called a pairing tool, if I'm not mistaken. This one is a 3mm. It's an 1/8 of an inch. If you can get a bit wider, then get a bit wider. I know other people, like for instance Ian Walker, what he did, and I tried to do it and I did not succeed, is he's got a file which is then ground down to give him an inch wide surface, which you can do when you're turning the shank. You can just do it 1, 2, 3, you're done. Whereas with this, you've got to go all the way down, depending on how long your shank is. I tried to do it with this. I spent a lot of time on the angle grinder getting that edge, and that's the sharp edge, trust me. But it still doesn't work. Now, I don't know why that is. I mean, it works, but it makes a hell of a racket. It jumps about. I don't understand the techniques behind it. But it didn't work for me, and I just carry on using this. It's reliable, and once you get sort of used to using it, it's kind of becomes second nature. Of course, you've got to be careful when you get near to the shank and near to the jaws of the chuck, and you can end up sort of rebounding off it. But once you get used to it, it's just second nature, and you just literally zoom, 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 and then you can start to sort of chase it across like that to give a smooth kind of finish to the shank, and that's it. And then you use sandpaper. So now you asked me about sandpaper. So when I've got a rough shape on the lathe, what I do is I bought a bunch of these. It's 80 grit, 120, and 240. So that's what I do. I start off at 40 grit, and so this one is all done off the lathe except for the top here. And this top I started with 40 and then went to 60, 80, 120, 240. And usually I'd go even higher using my little reels of sandpaper like that. I'd go up to 400 and even go up to 800 just with sandpaper, but I didn't bother because I'll just do this by hand afterwards. I'm really starting to get to appreciate the value of doing things by hand. So I want to do the heavy meaty work on the lathe and on the sander, but at the end, to really make things really nice and uniform, to get a good finish, hand sanding works really, really nicely. You guys have seen me use this extensively. This block is fantastic. It's sold by a company called Wix, which is one of the standard ones here, the building supply companies here, or builders merchants as they're known. It comes with a spongy kind of layer, and what that does is it gives you a nice smooth finish because it's not hard. If you have your sandpaper on a piece of wood, then it will cut, whereas when you have it on here, it just sands. And that something like that is a really, really handy thing to have. How do you know what grit sandpaper to start with? Well, you start with the roughest to get your rough shape going, and then you steadily increase to finer and finer and finer, so you get a really nice smooth finish. There's no shortcuts, unfortunately. You can't go from a 40 grit, got your rough sanding out, and then jump to 1000 grit because the 1000 grit sandpaper won't handle the grooves which have been created by the 40. Because when you sand with a 40 grit sandpaper, that actually, you look at it, it's really, really heavy. And what that will do is it will create grooves in the wood. It will take off, it'll cut through the wood for you, but whenever you stop, it'll be full of grooves, which to the depth of 40 grit. If you then jump to 1000 grit, 1000 grit is really fine. It's finer than sand, and it's very, very fine. So if you imagine, how can I explain this? Unless you guys already don't need explanation of this kind of thing, it might be elementary. Where's my pencil? imagine that there are little bits of sand on the sandpaper at 40 grit. 1,000 grit is going to be much shorter. So when you try and sandpaper with 1,000 grit, something like that, you're only going to touch the top here, and you'll never, unless you stand at it for hours and hours until you eventually get down there, but you're not going to do it unless you literally do it for hours. So this here is going to just take off these little bits at the top. Okay, so essentially what you need to do is you've got to steadily climb up. So you can take off, if you go from 40 to 60 grit, 60 grit will take off almost everything from that's been left by the 40 grit, and then you steadily bring it up, and eventually you get completely smooth. Absolutely to scale, Josh. Alright. So, oh well, what can you do? Okay. So, starting off at 40 grit, 60 grit, 80 grit, and I'll go up to 240 at least on the lathe. So if I'm doing, say, a pipe like that, so this one I'd probably take on the lathe, so all of the way around there, up until the shank you can do on the lathe. I will do the rim on the lathe as well. I would probably go to 600, maybe 800 on the lathe, and the chances are I'd have to redo, once I start to deal with this on the sanding wheel, you're going to end up sanding over that anyway. So I'll protect this area here with tape, and then do the rest on the sanding wheel. And I'll then by hand probably start at 400, go back to 400, 600, 800, 1,000, and and then I'll start. I'll do it on the mop with some composite, and get those little micro scratches out. Sand it again with a 600, then an 800, maybe 1,000. And then start to think about some staining. If I'm doing a contrast stain, then it will be stained, left overnight, or at least for 12 hours or so. Then take it back off down to around 400 grit again. Get the finish that you like the look of, taking off that heavy undercoat that you put on the night before, and just sand it away and leave whatever you want to leave behind, so that you end up with that contrast. And then sand again, down to around, it depends how far you want to go. I find the higher grit you go, the better the shine is and the longer it lasts. Because in reality, I mean, a lot of guys, I think, a lot of the English guys, they go up to 400 and that's it. They don't go beyond 400. But I'll usually go to around 1,200 if I've got the patience. I find that if you take 400 and you shine it and you go through the processes and finish it and go all the way down to your Kanuba wax, the Kanuba wax will look very nice, but handle it a little bit and that starts to dull, and then you're left with the 400 grit finish, which is smooth. But don't forget you've got stain on top of that, which takes away a bit of that smoothness, even if you sand it again afterwards. But you take it up to 800 or 1,000 or 1,200, then even once the Kanuba wax is all gone, you've still got a very, very smooth pipe, because you've sanded it to that far, to 800, 1,000, 1,200. To me, I see the benefit. Not everybody does, but I see the benefit. So that's what I've taken to doing on most of my pipes recently. There's a few pipes I want to revisit. You guys probably remember this pipe as one of my first sort of attempts at a freehand pipe. I've got to do a new stem for it. It's got a big bowl, it's well drilled, The puffer, yeah, absolutely. This is the puffer fish. You go up to 2,000 on Welsh slit on your knives. Okay. As I go to around 1,200 on average, maybe 1,000. Depends what I've got, what sandpaper I've got. Because this stuff is not cheap. You get decent sandpaper. There's 10 sheets in these packs, and they cost about £7. So you're talking about 70p a sheet of paper. What is this? This is 180 grit. So I didn't have any lowish grit for hand sanding. This is 180. So that's quite coarse. I've got 150 in this stuff, but I can't put this around my sanding block. This stuff I've got 150, 240, 320 and 400. They come in a set of 4. And I keep this on hand. It's very useful stuff. This can be used wet and dry. So when I'm sanding stems, or trying to shape the bit and make it more comfortable, I use this stuff, and I'll do that wet. It's 240. So it's pretty much the same grades that I use, but just in sheets, so I can use it with my block. This is some more 1,200 for the other end of the scale. Oh dear. The thing with the buffer, if you're depends what you're doing with the buffer, what your process is. If you're going first with the composite before the carnauba wax, then the composite itself will make micro scratches in the briar. So I used to do the same. I used to use whether it was Tripoli or something a little bit more pasty, a little bit finer than Tripoli, to finish off the pipe before I carnauba'd it. But a few people have told me that you don't want that to be the last process, because the composite fills the pores of the briar and it can actually stop it breathing. It can affect the smokability of the pipe in the long run. You may not see it immediately, but in the long run it could affect the smokability. So even though I do use the wheel to polish out the pipe to finish it, I'll still sand it again after I do that. I find that the mop I find is a good leveler. It just gives you a nice universal clean look on the pipe. Takes out any sort of nooks and crannies and bumps and things like that. But I still find afterwards that I want to sand it, and I'll go through a few grits of sand before I will then stain and polish, and I won't use the mop again after that. 1, to reopen the grain, and 2, because I want that finer finish. Cheers, Mike. Yeah, I'm not going to stay on for too long. I think it's now 1:45. I'll probably stop in about 15 minutes because I do want to get an early night. So I don't know what the weather's going to bring tomorrow, so I need to be sparky tomorrow in case I need to do anything. Thanks, Mike. You can buff anywhere you like, but if you want efficiency, then you use the buffing wheel. It's just, you can... no worries, Andrew. It just works at much more high speed. I have some crystalline wax, for instance. This stuff here, there's loads of information about it online. This stuff is actually made by a neighbour of mine, which, although people have spoken about it, I think Tim once mentioned this to me, this wax. And I was talking to somebody about it. I don't remember how it came up, but a guy who I know, I've known him for many, many years, he owns the company that makes this. This has got the warrant, Her Majesty's warrant on the top there. You can see this is used in all the museums for it's a museum quality product, and it's very easy to apply. I've used it a little bit. You can see there's a bit of it missing. But this stuff, you can literally take a paper towel, take some out, and smear it on the pipe. Give it a good smear, buff it with a sock or just a rag, and that's it, you're done. It puts a layer of wax which hardens on the product, and that's it. But it's quite dull to me. There is some shine there, but it's nothing like using carnauba wax after a good high grit polish sandpaper. Thanks, EP. Yeah, so this I could do by hand. So at a pinch, if I was in a bind and my machines weren't working or out of electricity or whatever it might be, I could use this. And it's a good protector as well. It resists heat and fingerprints and that kind of thing. So if you put this on quite liberally, you get a nice layer. It's almost like you're putting a layer of lacquer on your pipe. I was thinking about doing this, leaving it for a couple of days to harden properly, and then using carnauba wax to see how that worked. When I asked the guy about doing that, he seemed to be quite negative about it, but I haven't actually tried it. It could be that he just didn't like the idea of me sort of saying that it needed something else after his product was used, but... Excuse me. The Mille Fleur, actually very, very nice. I have had those. There's also a Romeo and Juliet Mille Fleur. And they are really nice. Just you got to watch out for the draw. That's all. Like with any narrow ring gauge Cuban cigars, the draw can be very dodgy. Not just the narrow ones, but the wide ones as well. Oh, excuse me. I just took delivery of some on Friday. I got some White Churchills, Romeo and Juliet White Churchills, but they're from 2019, so they need to sleep in the humidor for a while. And I also got some more of the La Gloria Cubana, Spanish regional edition from 2016, I think they are. So they've got a nice few years on them now. I still have a few left of the ones that I had originally when they first came out, and they're really starting to taste good now. So they were still at a good price, so I bought some more. Yeah, I'll be honest with you, when I first was really getting into Cuban cigars a few years back, I wouldn't touch the Romeo and Juliets, any of them. I just found them to be so bland, I found them to be so lightweight, and they would get bitter really quickly. But now I actually really, really enjoy them. I find that they've got a really nice, refined, sweet taste. And some of them are great. The White Churchills especially. The White Churchills I find have got a bit more of a floral essence to them, a bit similar to the H. Upmann connoisseurs. But with those you have to be lucky to get the ones with a bit of a ruddy wrapper, slightly red tinge to the wrapper. How you doing, Tree? £15 at Pure Express, okay. Yeah, WV, I've got, I just got a box of 10, I don't usually buy the boxes of 25. The only one that I do is, whenever I do, is only if they're not available in 10s. I don't like to outlay £200-300 for a box of cigars. I prefer to around the 100 mark, 150 mark max. I mean, I could go online to a guy on Facebook and get most of the American cigars, most of the undercrowns, the Olivas. I can get boxes of 20 or 24 for literally £100, and every so often that's what I do. and I'll always have some on hand. I really do need to actually top up on some undercrowns. I think I've got like 1 or 2 left. And they're good to have. The undercrowns are really good. They're tasty cigars. I do like them. And they're certainly good once you've left them for a while as well. I never used to think that the non-Cubans aged that well, but I've noticed that they do. The ones that I've had in my humidor for 3 years or so, definitely tastier, smoother. The flavours have kind of sort of snapped into focus a little bit, clearer, cleaner. And that rough sort of rough edge, you know, on a lot of the American cigars disappears. Undercrowns, I don't know where you're buying them from. Depends where you're buying them from. But if you get them in America, you're talking about $120, $130 for a box of 20. Unless they've gone up recently. So what are you talking about? You're talking about $6 or $7 a cigar. It's really cheap compared to what we pay here. The Hat Piper, how you doing? I think I Havanas have started doing quite a big selection of non-Cubans now as well, so definitely worth checking them out. And all their shipping is free. I've only really got 2 or 3 sources of cigars overseas if I don't buy them here, and Havanas is probably my main one. And they ship worldwide, and their prices are great. Compared to here, anyway. Compared to buying them in the shop, their prices are phenomenal. I don't think I've tried the Davidoff number 2. The only Davidoffs that I've really smoked enough of to be able to talk about are the Nicaraguan, the Yamasa, which I haven't smoked for a while now. And the Lathe. For me, the Lathe is their best cigar. Hi, Piping Merce. Is there a minimum price for delivery? No, but they don't sell single sticks, single cigars. Everything is by the box. So that you could buy a box. Everything is by the box. There are some boxes which you can buy which are only a few cigars. So, for instance, the Partigas E, that's 5 cigars, you know, big thick cigars, but they're usually about $60 or $70 for 5 cigars or 6 cigars. So you could buy that, and that would be free to ship. But I don't think it's really worthwhile. The way to go on I Havanas is they have special deals every month, and those are invariably the ones I'll buy. Because most Cubans I enjoy, it doesn't matter which ones they are, and if you wait long enough, the ones that you like come on. Every few months they'll come on with the stuff that you like. So for me, you guys know that the Connoisseur number 1 is my favourite cigar. So that will come on every sort of 5 or 6 weeks. It'll come on, and instead of being $220 or $230 for a box of 25, which in itself is a cheap price, certainly compared to what we pay here, it'll come on at say $179. So you're talking about like 150, 140 pounds for a box of 25 Cuban cigars. It's a steal. Okay, look, it's a big warehouse and they ship a huge amount of cigars out, so they may not necessarily check the quality, and sometimes, very rarely, but occasionally you can get a box which is a bit green. I had one box like that which was just unacceptable to me. A lot of the wrappers were cracked on them. I sent them pictures. They said fine, no problem, send them back. I sent them back. When they received them, they said you can either have a replacement or a credit to your account. Which one would you like? And I think they even offered me a refund as well, which I wasn't interested in. I'm a regular buyer. It's I Havanas. There you go, ihavanas.com. And they sent it back, and they just put a credit on the account, and the next time I wanted to buy, it was done. I was very happy with it. The only thing I would advise you is that the first couple of times that you buy, you'll have to wait for your cigars. So if you want your cigars within a couple of days, don't waste your time. So until they know you as a customer, that first couple of orders might take, I think the first time I ordered, it took me about 4 weeks to get my cigars. After that, I usually get them 7 to 10 days. They get shipped out from Switzerland, I think. Sometimes they come from Hungary. They come from different places in the world, depending on which warehouse they're shipping from. But I don't know how things will change once Brexit takes effect in December. I don't know. Yeah, the Lathe Tower, Andrew, for me, if I'm going to, even if it's cheap, I'll still get a Cuban cigar, because a Cuban cigar is a Cuban cigar, whereas the Lathe Tower is trying to be a Cuban cigar. It's a non-Cuban trying to be a Cuban. So for me, I might as well get the Cubans. Hey, Professor Jeremiah, how you doing? But it is a very, very good cigar, I must admit. You know, the first time I smoked it, I thought, fantastic. Yeah, but Hasico is not the same. You won't get the same prices. You will not get the same prices in Hasico. They'll be cheaper than buying them here in the UK, but they'll still be European prices. I Havanas is internet prices, like bulk ordering internet prices. Have a look. I mean, maybe Hasico's got the same prices. I don't know. The last time, whenever I did a trial to see where I'd be better off, nothing could beat I Havanas. So all in all, my experience with them has been good. As I say, as long as you've got a little bit of patience, they're the best really source to buy Cuban cigars. I might even try and get some non-Cubans from them. We'll see. I'll have a look. My humidor's looking quite nourished at the moment, so I'm not in any rush. Andrew, while I'm on, any other questions that you wanted to ask about the pipe making? What lathe did you get? You said you got a lathe now. I haven't tried Monte Fortuna. I've had contact or other people recommending them, but I haven't tried them yet. No. Do I pay? Hi, Tam. Do I pay duty? Generally speaking, not, because they send it from Europe. So unless, as long as you're not being greedy. I remember once I did that and I bought maybe 2 or 3 boxes at the same time, so then, you know, you start to go over certain limits, and then I did get done. But I generally will buy 1, maximum 2 boxes at a time, and that's it. If I'm buying a 25 box, I'll buy 1 box and no more. That's one thing I've learned, is not to be too greedy, because when you're packing a big box and it says on its cigars, which they do, they will write on its cigars, they'll write it in a script where maybe the guy at the customs office can't be bothered to look at, but because it's coming from Europe, generally speaking, it's not an issue. You got a jet. Ooh, somebody's got money to spend. Awesome. That's amazing. Andrew, I'm jealous. That's a good. Jet is a great make. It's a fantastic name, and that should last you for many, many years. Did you get a wood one or a metal one? Yeah, I agree with you, Andrew. Absolutely. Definitely get whatever you can afford. The best that you can afford. And the variable is a huge plus. I mean, they're all variable in that you can start changing the band, you know, the rubber band on the gears. But to have the knob to just speed up and slow down, that's just awesome. You guys see me when I do the buffing, you know, it's amazing. You can just control exactly what you're doing. Yeah, the only thing about getting a wood lathe is that once you sort of get to grips with it, you then start to think about getting a machining lathe, a metal lathe, and you can do much more precise work. Have you got yourself some chucks and jaws yet, Andrew? Could you make a pipe totally by hand? For sure you can. Yeah, absolutely you can. Just with decent files, a hand drill, If you want to go completely non-electric, I suppose that you could use a hand drill with a vise. You'd need to hold it in a vise and a good quality hand drill. But yeah, no reason why not. If you're handy with some files and sandpaper, no problem. Just be careful, Andrew. Just make sure you're fully protected and make sure you've got a full face mask. Something like that. They're really cheap. When I first started, I wore this all the time. Then I grew in confidence. And, even no matter how experienced you are, the briar does fly every so often. You saw that one of you guys must have seen it when I was doing it live. The briar went flying. Sometimes even if you're concentrating, it could the mop or the thing could just catch on something, on an edge somewhere, and it just sends it flying. So you got to be careful. North Country Fisher, that's really interesting to know, because I'm looking for somebody to make some bits for me. If he has a fabrication shop, that would be quite interesting. I really want to get something for holding stems. Can I ask you, actually, does he take commissions? Does he take orders for that kind of thing, or has he just got set things that he does? My roof is starting to fly, I think. I've got a tarpaulin on there to stop the rain getting in, and it's held in place with a bunch of bricks. I'm a bit worried that they're going to go flying tonight. I'll wake up in the morning, see the tarpaulin halfway down the road. Oh, right, I see. Okay, fair enough. Right, we're 1:05. Yeah, guys, I'm going to have a bit of an early night, even though it's 1:05 in the morning, so it's not that early, but it's early for me. So I'm going to have an early night, try and shift this cold, get a decent night's sleep. I'm going to wish you all well. Thank you for joining me. You can hear that my voice is going, so I didn't want to just not turn up at all. So we've had a little bit of a chat. Hat Piper, WV, North Country Fisher, Andrew, Paul, Professor Jeremiah, Tree, Tam, the piping nurse. I thought you were the piping nurse, because I could certainly do with a nurse tonight. Who else have we got here? Everybody else, Tim, North Country Fisher, Kevin, Daniel, Newton, and everybody else. Thanks very much for joining. I wish you well. And yes, thank you, Josh. Hopefully we'll be alright tomorrow, and we'll get back on the lathe tomorrow with a bit of luck. And we'll see how we go. Good night, Josh. Thank you very much, Joe. Thanks, everybody. Catch you on the next one.